Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into its weight. Allow your breathing to even out. There is no destination to reach tonight, no arrival to consider. The journey has already slowed. The path will carry itself. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called Inside a Vast Library Beneath a Dome. The entrance does not announce itself. It opens quietly, a tall wooden door easing inward on well oiled hinges, revealing a space that does not rush to be understood. You step inside. The air is cooler here, not cold, but held at a steady depth. It carries a faint trace of paper and stone, not sharp, not dry, simply present. The kind of scent that lingers in places built for time rather than traffic. The dome rises above you, though at first you do not look up. The scale registers indirectly, in the way sound settles quickly, in the way your own breath feels contained without echo. Your steps cross the stone floor in an even rhythm. The surface beneath your feet is smooth, but not polished to gloss. It holds a slight texture, the quiet memory of countless crossings. Light descends from above in a wide, diffused circle. It does not fall in beams. It filters, softened through glass set high in the curvature of the dome. The illumination is even, calm. There are no harsh contrasts, no sharp angles of brightness, only a gentle gradation from center to edge. You move forward a few paces and pause. The room holds itself. Shelves rise in deliberate arcs, arranged not in straight lines, but in subtle curves that mirror the ceiling above. Their wood is deep-toned and matte, absorbing rather than reflecting light. Books rest upright in quiet ranks, their spines forming vertical lines that give the space structure without tension. The height of the dome becomes clearer now as your gaze lifts. It does not feel towering. It feels measured. The curve is wide and complete, drawing the eye upward and then back down in a continuous arc. Your shoulders lower a fraction as you stand beneath it. The air moves gently here, circulating without noticeable current. You might not sense it at all except for the way it keeps the atmosphere from feeling still or stagnant. It is simply balanced. A reading table stands not far from the center, broad, solid, worn in places where hands have rested. You approach it slowly. The wood beneath your palm is neither warm nor cool. It is at the temperature of the room, steady and unremarkable. Along the edge, just near the corner, a shallow dip has formed where a thumb once lingered repeatedly, smoothing the grain over time. It is a small detail, almost unnoticeable, and yet it holds. You draw your hand back and continue walking. The sound of your steps remains contained, absorbed by the height and curvature. There is no echo to chase them. The space receives each sound and allows it to settle immediately. Rows of shelves extend outward in widening circles. Each aisle curves slightly, guiding movement without insisting upon direction. There is no straight corridor pulling you forward, only gentle progression. Light shifts faintly above as a cloud passes across the sky outside the dome. The change is subtle, a shade darker, then lighter again. The movement does not distract. It merely marks the passing of something beyond the glass. You remain within. The stone floor transitions to an area rug near one of the outer reading alcoves. Its fibers are dense and muted in tone. When you step onto it, the sound beneath you disappears almost entirely. Even your own presence feels lighter there. A chair sits nearby, upholstered in thick fabric that has softened with years. The surface shows no damage, only use, a slight rounding at the arms, a faint crease where weight has rested repeatedly. You do not sit yet. Instead, you allow your gaze to move slowly around the perimeter of the dome. Columns rise at intervals, their bases wide, and grounded, their surfaces carved with simple lines that guide the eye upward. They do not compete with the shelves, they support quietly. The dome itself seems less like a ceiling and more like an extension of air shaped into form. Its panels meet at delicate seams, barely visible from this distance. The structure does not impose, it encloses without pressure. A page turns somewhere in the distance, just once. The sound is soft enough that it might have been imagined, but it settles into the space and then fades. No further movement follows it. You exhale slowly. The scale of the room is now fully felt, not through measurement, but through proportion. You are small within it, yes, but not diminished. The space does not overwhelm, it accommodates. Your steps resume, slower now, following the gentle arc of shelves that guide you around the interior. Titles line the spines of books in gold and faded ink, but you do not read them. Their presence is enough. Their arrangement suggests order without demanding attention. Light rests evenly across the floor. It does not concentrate in any single place. The center of the room is slightly brighter, but the difference is gradual, a soft gradient rather than a spotlight. You pause again beneath the widest curve of the dome. There is something reassuring about rooms built to outlast the day. The thought passes without insistence. Above you, the glass panels hold the sky in muted tone. No direct view, only diffused brightness. The outside world feels distant but not removed. It is simply elsewhere. The library does not resist that distance. It gathers itself inward. You remain standing beneath the height and curve, aware of how the architecture shapes the air around you, not tightly, not loosely. Just enough, your breathing steadies further. The vastness no longer feels vast, it feels balanced, and you are already within it. You remain beneath the curve a moment longer, allowing your eyes to adjust not to brightness, but to proportion. The dome does not feel higher with each glance, it feels steadier. The longer you stand within it, the less it registers as height at all, and more as enclosure, a wide, protective arc that carries its own gravity. The shelves closest to you rise in layered tiers. Their upper levels are reached by a narrow, rolling ladder resting along a rail. The ladder stands motionless now, its small brass wheels touching the track with the faintest tension. One of its wooden steps shows a slightly darker patch near the center, worn smooth by the repeated pressure of a single foot over years. It is not dramatic. It is simply used. You move closer to one of the shelves, not to examine a title, but to observe the spacing between volumes. The books are aligned carefully, but not rigidly. Some lean a fraction inward. Others stand upright with more certainty. The edges of their pages vary in tone, ivory, cream, pale gray, each carrying the quiet imprint of time. When your fingers brush lightly along the spine of one volume, the texture is dry and firm. The material gives no sound beyond a soft whisper of contact. You do not pull it free. You allow it to remain where it has been placed. There is no urgency here. Even the air seems to hold its breath in long intervals. A faint mechanical hum threads through the lower structure of the building, not noticeable at first, only gradually perceived. It may be ventilation circulating through hidden channels above the archways. It may be the building settling into its own temperature. Whatever its source, it remains low and consistent, woven into the background like a steady undercurrent. You begin to walk again, following the natural curve of the room. The stone beneath your feet shifts slightly in tone as you pass through areas where light touches more directly. The difference is subtle, a pale wash that rounds the floor into gentle gradients rather than sharp transitions. One of the outer alcoves holds a long table beneath a narrow window set into the base of the dome. The glass there is slightly textured, diffusing light further. A single chair rests pulled back a fraction from the table's edge, as though someone stood and did not return. There is no sense of absence, only pause. Your palm settles briefly against the back of the chair. The wood carries a smoothness along the top rail, worn by years of contact. Beneath your touch, you feel a faint irregularity, a tiny indentation no wider than a fingernail, where pressure once pressed repeatedly in the same spot. It is barely visible, but it remains. Rooms remember in small ways. You continue walking, circling back toward the center where the dome opens widest. From here, the architecture becomes more symmetrical, though not severe. The curvature guides movement without enforcing it. You could choose any direction, and the room would accept it equally. Above, the light shifts again, not in color, but in density. The passing cloud outside thins, allowing a fraction more brightness to enter. It spreads gently across the floor and climbs the lower shelves in a muted arc. The dome does not reflect sharply. It gathers light and lowers it. You pause directly beneath the highest point, standing within the broadest circle of illumination. The scale is unmistakable here. The shelves seem taller. The air seems deeper. And yet, the stillness remains intact. Your breath lengthens without effort. There is something about circular spaces that steadies the mind. Perhaps it is the absence of corners. Perhaps it is the way the eye can travel continuously without interruption. Whatever the reason, the effect is subtle but unmistakable. You feel held but not enclosed. A distant shift of paper echoes faintly from somewhere along the outer ring, a soft alignment of pages settling against one another. It does not repeat. It simply marks a small recalibration within the quiet. The floor beneath you feels level and assured. The dome above feels wide but balanced. The shelves around you stand in calm repetition. You are not searching, you are not selecting, you are simply here. The vastness has stopped feeling vast. It feels measured now, proportional, a place where scale exists without pressure. Your shoulders loosen another fraction. The light continues its gradual arc across the stone, and the library remains steady around you. Expansive, quiet, and already complete. You begin to move along the outer ring of the library, following the slow curve of shelves that trace the interior of the dome. The floor carries a faint change in texture here, smoother where footsteps most often pass, slightly more grain beneath the tables, and reading alcoves where movement slows. Your steps adjust without thought, the rhythm of them quiet and evenly spaced. Between the shelves, narrow passageways open like calm corridors. They are not tight, but they invite a slower pace. As you turn into one, the light shifts again, thinning into softer layers that rest across the spines of books rather than the floor. The air here feels marginally cooler, held longer away from the central brightness. You drift between the rows. The books do not crowd. They stand in measured proximity, their varied heights creating a gentle, uneven skyline of leather, cloth, and paper. Some bindings are deep brown, nearly the color of the surrounding wood. Others carry muted shades of green, slate, or faded burgundy. The tones never shout. They remain contained, absorbed into the architecture itself. There is a ladder here as well, set against the inner shelf. Its brass rail curves slightly to match the dome's circumference. When you rest your hand against one of the ladder's side rails, the metal meets your skin at nearly the same temperature. Neither cool nor warm, simply balanced. The boundary between surface and palm feels momentarily indistinct. You release it without lifting the ladder from its place. Somewhere beyond the shelves, you hear the faint turn of a page. Just once. The sound is delicate, a light lift, a soft fall. It carries no urgency. It disappears almost immediately back into the room's steady hum. You move onward. At intervals, small reading tables appear between the stacks, positioned beneath narrow shafts of diffused light that fall from high windows along the dome's base. On one table rests an open volume, its pages gently curved toward the center. A thin strip of fabric, perhaps once used as a marker, lies draped across the gutter, its edge slightly frayed. The cloth holds still. The pages do not move. Even the air seems to settle more deeply here. You draw a finger lightly along the table's surface. The wood carries a faint ripple beneath its polish, a subtle irregularity where grain once lifted and was smoothed again. It catches the light for a moment, then recedes. Rooms like this do not rush their hours, they accumulate them. You step back into the broader curve of the outer ring. The dome overhead appears closer from here, its interior surface marked by faint radial lines that guide the eye upward without insisting upon height. Each line meets the next in quiet convergence at the center, forming a geometry that feels deliberate but not rigid. Your breathing aligns with your pace. Inhale, 2 steps. Exhale, 2 steps. No instruction, no counting, simply rhythm. As you continue, you pass a recessed alcove where the shelves deepen slightly into shadow. A small reading lamp rests at the edge of a desk there, its glass shade dimmed and unlit. The cord trails neatly toward the floor, disappearing beneath the desk's carved lip. You do not reach for the switch. The ambient light is already enough. Further along, the shelves widen to accommodate larger volumes, tall folios bound in thick leather, their spines stamped with faint gilt lettering that has softened over time. You do not attempt to read the titles. The presence of them is sufficient. They carry weight without demanding attention. A low mechanical hum adjusts somewhere above, perhaps part of the building's ventilation responding to the slow shift of temperature as afternoon leans toward evening. The sound is steady, not intrusive. It weaves itself into the room's deeper silence rather than breaking it. You pause briefly at the end of one aisle. Ahead, the central space opens again beneath the dome. Light settles across the floor in a broad circle, edged by shadow where the shelves rise. The scale no longer surprises. It feels familiar now, as though your body has already mapped its proportions. There is something steadying about places built for preservation. They do not rush to change, they hold. You resume your slow circuit. At the base of one shelf, a small brass plate marks a section number. Its surface bears a faint scuff near one corner, the metal dulled slightly where fingers must have brushed it repeatedly over years. The imperfection is minor, almost invisible unless sought. You notice it, then you move on. In the next passageway, the air shifts again, a hint of dryness from paper, a trace of old wood warmed earlier in the day. It is not strong. It simply exists, folded into the space. Your hand glides lightly along the shelf's edge as you walk, fingertips grazing the spines in a soft succession. Cloth, leather, paper. The textures vary gently, creating a quiet sequence beneath your touch. The library continues around you in balanced repetition. No shelf feels more important than another. No table draws you in more than the rest. The rhythm has begun. It gathers without effort, and you remain within it, moving at the same measured pace as the light that slowly lowers along the curve of the dome. You continue along the arc of shelving, noticing how the curve encourages a slower walk without ever insisting upon it. The geometry does part of the work. Straight lines ask for destination. Curves ask only for continuation. The floor beneath you holds the faint echo of your steps, softened by distance before the sound ever has the chance to sharpen. A narrow window set high along the dome's lower rim admits a diluted band of afternoon light. It does not fall directly onto the books, but filters first across the interior ribs of the structure, touching pale stone before drifting downward. By the time it reaches the shelves, it has thinned into a gentle sheen that rests along the edges of the bindings. You pause briefly beneath that light. Dust motes turn within it, not swirling, not dancing, simply suspended, rising, and lowering almost imperceptibly. The air feels undisturbed. Even your breathing seems to enter it without disruption. There is a quiet assurance in the way the shelves meet the floor. no gaps, no unevenness. The craftsmanship reveals itself in small alignments, the way one panel sits flush against another, the way the brass fastenings hold their place without glare. You pass another table, this one bearing a closed book set squarely at its center. Its cover shows a faint crease along one corner, as though opened many times to the same page. The mark is softened, not worn through. You do not open it. The space requires nothing further. Somewhere behind you, another page turns, just once, and then the sound is gone, folded back into the dome's steady, gathered hush. The curve of the library continues without interruption, guiding you deeper beneath the dome where the air feels fractionally cooler, not from any draft, but from the stone's patient retention of shade. The shelves here are slightly taller. Their upper tiers require a narrow ladder fixed to a sliding rail, though no one moves it now. It rests where it was last left, wheels aligned neatly within the groove metal polished by quiet use. You continue at an even pace. The sound of your steps alters subtly depending on where you stand. Near the outer wall, the floor answers with a faint, rounded echo. Closer to the center, beneath the highest point of the dome, the sound disperses more quickly, as though absorbed upward before it can return. It is interesting how architecture changes sound without drawing attention to itself. A long table stretches across the center of this level, its surface uninterrupted except for three small reading lamps spaced at careful intervals. They are unlit. Their cords trail neatly toward the floor, disappearing through narrow apertures in the wood. The brass bases have dulled to a muted tone that matches the bindings around you. Your hand rests briefly against the table's edge as you pass. The wood holds the memory of warmth, though no warmth remains. It has been handled often enough to smooth its grain along certain edges. There is a softened notch along the underside where fingers have curved over years, barely visible unless you know to look for it. You do not linger there long. Beyond the table, a set of tall windows arcs between the shelves, cut directly into the stone. The glass is slightly thick, its surface not perfectly uniform. Through it, the sky appears faintly curved, shaped by the dome's architecture. The light that enters is diffused, even at its brightest. Outside, nothing moves distinctly enough to draw the eye. Inside, the air remains steady. You continue along the inner ring where the books change subtly in tone, from deep leather browns to muted greens and blues. Their spines carry no large lettering, only small, restrained titles embossed low along the edge. The language appears varied. Some alphabets are familiar, others are not. All are arranged with an understated order that suggests care rather than rigidity. You slide one book partway free. The motion is quiet, almost frictionless. The pages inside are thicker than expected, their edges slightly rough. You lift the cover only enough to glimpse the interior margin. A small notation rests there in careful handwriting, a date, perhaps, or a reference number. The ink has faded slightly into the paper, becoming part of it. There is something reassuring about records that endure quietly. You replace the book without fully opening it. No urgency presses you to continue or to stop. The movement itself becomes its own gentle rhythm. Reach, pause, release. Step, step, turn. The dome above carries your small shifts of sound upward and lets them dissolve before they gather weight. A distant mechanical hum adjusts almost imperceptibly, perhaps part of the climate system that keeps the air balanced. It does not intrude, it steadies. The further you move along the curve, the more the shelves seem to lean inward, though they do not actually change their angle. It is only perspective. The height of the dome becomes more evident here, the arc lifting higher than your eyes can follow without strain. You do not strain. Instead, your gaze rests lower, at the rows within reach. at the subtle variations in texture where some bindings are smoother than others. One spine bears a faint scratch near its base, as though it brushed once against a metal edge before being returned carefully to place. These are not dramatic marks. They are the quiet evidence of presence. At the far end of this level, a narrow alcove opens between two tall shelves. It contains a single chair positioned beneath a circular aperture in the dome. The opening is glazed, allowing light to fall directly downward in a clean column that shifts slowly as the day advances. The chair is simple, upholstered in linen that has faded slightly along the arms. A small crease runs diagonally across the seat cushion, pressed into shape by repetition. You pause beside it. You do not sit. The light within the alcove lowers almost imperceptibly while you stand there. It touches the chair's fabric, then the floor beside it, then the lower edge of the nearest shelf. The movement is gradual enough to feel continuous rather than segmented. Evening rarely announces itself, does it? The thought arises lightly and passes. From somewhere above, perhaps a higher tier, a faint metallic click sounds, the quiet settling of structure adjusting to temperature. It is brief. Contained, you continue along the arc. The arrangement of books begins to thin slightly, creating small pockets of negative space between volumes. These gaps are intentional. They allow the shelves to breathe, preventing the density from becoming oppressive. Light threads through them, catching occasionally on gilt edges before moving on. A thin thread of brightness catches along one page edge and holds there for a moment before slipping away. You notice the pattern without analyzing it. The central floor beneath the dome remains open, unencumbered by furniture. Its stone surface bears faint circular scuffs where tables once stood, long since moved to new positions. The marks are smoothed, not erased. You cross that open space slowly. Sound alters again, more immediate here, then softer as you near the opposite shelves. The architecture performs its quiet adjustments around you without ceremony. On the inner wall, a narrow staircase ascends toward an upper gallery. The steps are shallow, their edges rounded slightly from long use. The railing curves upward in a continuous line, polished where hands have traveled. You rest your palm lightly upon it, cool metal, solid. There is a kind of patience in structures that endure repeated touch without complaint. You begin to ascend. Each step carries the same measured cadence. No rush, no pause. The air grows fractionally thinner near the dome's upper reach, not from lack, but from openness. Sound disperses more quickly here, dissolving into the curvature above. At the top, the gallery runs narrow and continuous, allowing a vantage point across the entire library. From here, the tables below appear smaller, their surfaces like islands within a wide expanse of stone. The shelves trace the dome's interior in steady concentric arcs. You lean lightly against the balustrade. The view does not overwhelm. It expands gently. From this height, the subtle differences in light become more apparent. Some sections glow faintly warmer, others remain cool and shadowed. The variation is delicate, never stark. It gives the interior a living quality, as though the building itself inhales and exhales through brightness and dimness. A single page turns somewhere below, then stillness resumes. You remain here for a time, letting your gaze travel along the arcs without fixing upon any single point. The repetition of shelves does not feel monotonous. It feels reassuring, a rhythm made visible. Eventually, you continue along the upper gallery, fingers trailing just above the railing without quite touching it. The dome curves overhead, its ribs intersecting in a lattice that meets at the apex far above. From here, the scale feels wider, yet no more demanding. The library does not insist upon comprehension. It offers only presence. and you move within it unhurried as the light continues its gradual lowering, the shelves holding their quiet order, and the dome carrying each small sound upward into its broad, patient arc. You continue along the upper gallery where the curve of the dome feels closer, though it remains far above your reach. From here, the architecture reveals its quiet mathematics, the ribs intersecting at measured intervals, the panels between them fitted with care that has endured without visible strain. Dust does not gather in obvious drifts. It settles so lightly across surfaces that it seems almost intentional, a softening rather than an accumulation. Your steps follow the arc. Below, the central floor opens like a calm interior sea of stone. The tables rest within it, steady and unoccupied. Their proportions seem different from this height, smaller, yes, but also more deliberate. Each lamp base forms a tiny circle of brass that catches what light remains and releases it without insistence. The air at this level carries a slightly different tone. It feels thinner, though not cold. It moves almost imperceptibly, drawn upward along the curvature of the dome, then dispersing again through vents, so carefully placed that they remain invisible unless searched for. You do not search. Instead, your attention rests on the repetition of shelves along the wall beside you. Their upper tiers hold volumes bound in pale linen, edges aligned with quiet precision. The spines here show less wear than those below. Their colors are lighter, cream, muted gray, faint blue. It gives this level a sense of early morning even though the day continues to lower toward evening. You pause beside a narrow desk tucked discreetly into the wall's curve. It holds no clutter. A single blotter rests at its center, its surface marked by faint impressions of writing long since completed. Beside it, an inkwell stands capped, the glass clear enough to reveal the remaining ink as a dark pool within. The chair behind the desk bears a small crease along its back where fabric has bent repeatedly. It is a small detail, but it anchors the space. You ease your fingers across the desk's surface. The wood is smooth, though not glossy. There is a faint scratch near the corner, shallow enough to have softened over time, yet still visible if the light strikes it at the right angle. The light shifts. It touches the scratch briefly, then slides along the grain. From somewhere within the lower stacks, a ladder's rail gives a soft metallic sigh as temperature adjusts the metal by a fraction. The sound is not intrusive. It feels like the building exhaling through its joints. You continue along the gallery. Here, the books seem arranged not by height or color, but by an internal logic you do not need to decipher. Some lean together as though in quiet conversation. Others stand with measured separation, creating narrow channels of shadow between them. Shadow here is never heavy. It gathers lightly at the base of each shelf, rounding the edges of volumes without obscuring them. You slide one book partway free from its place. The linen cover feels cool against your fingertips. Inside, the paper carries a faint scent, not sharp, not sweet, but dry and almost mineral, like stone that has held air for many seasons. You close it again gently. There is no impulse to read fully, only to touch. You walk further along until the gallery narrows slightly where the dome's curvature steepens. From here, you can see the highest point above, a circular aperture glazed in thick glass, allowing the sky to show through in a softened arc. The color beyond is pale, shading gradually toward silver. Evening gathers without announcement. You lean against the balustrade once more. Below, the shelves form concentric circles that draw the eye inward and outward at the same time. The repetition does not feel endless. It feels contained, as though the entire structure exists within a held breath that never quite releases, yet never tightens. A page turns again below. The sound reaches you softened by distance. You notice how sound behaves differently at this height, rising cleanly, then dissolving before it can echo. The dome absorbs more than it reflects. It is designed for this quiet. You continue along until you reach a narrow stair that leads still higher, not to another full gallery, but to a small maintenance platform suspended just beneath the dome's apex. The steps are steeper here, the metal railing cool against your palm. You ascend without hurry. Each step is measured, even. At the top, the platform is small enough that you feel its boundaries immediately. It is ringed by a low barrier and holds only a simple control panel, switches aligned neatly, each labeled in restrained lettering. None are lit brightly. They rest in a neutral state. The glass above you curves overhead, showing the sky through its thickened surface. The light here is different, more direct, yet filtered by the pane's subtle imperfections. It falls across the panel's surface in a quiet gradient. You stand there for a moment. From this point, the library below appears unified. The shelves, tables, and floor merge into a single composition, each element steady within the dome's embrace. It is strange how scale can expand without becoming overwhelming. The thought passes lightly. You lower your gaze to the panel. A faint mechanical hum adjusts almost imperceptibly, perhaps the air system balancing itself for the coming night. The hum is steady, low enough to blend with your own breathing. You rest your hand lightly upon the barrier. The metal carries a faint warmth where it has held light. It cools gradually as the light lowers. Below, a small ripple of brightness moves across a shelf edge as the sun shifts behind thin cloud. The ripple travels, touches three adjacent spines, then disappears into shadow. Nothing announces its departure. You descend from the platform slowly. Each step returns you to the wider gallery, where the shelves once again stand at eye level. The movement downward feels like settling into a deeper layer rather than leaving something behind. The air feels slightly denser here, more enclosed, more held. You continue along the curve, noticing how the repetition of steps creates a rhythm beneath the dome, soft, measured, consistent. It is not a metronome, it is simply continuity. A faint scuff marks one stair edge where countless souls have passed. It has been worn smooth. You reach the lower gallery and cross back toward the central stair that returns you to the main floor. The descent is easy. The railing curves downward with quiet assurance. At the bottom, the floor feels steadier beneath your feet. The scale returns to its original proportion, neither vast nor small, just balanced. You walk once more between the shelves on this main level. The books here carry deeper hues, russet, charcoal, muted green. Their surfaces hold more visible wear, though still carefully kept. A soft column of light from the high aperture shifts again, now reaching further across the floor. It brushes the edge of a table leg, then slides slowly toward the opposite wall. The movement is gradual enough that it feels continuous rather than segmented. You pass a narrow window set between shelves where the outside sky has begun to deepen in tone. The glass diffuses the change, keeping the interior steady even as the world beyond shifts toward evening. There is something reassuring about rooms that maintain their balance while light changes. You pause beside another reading table. This one holds a single open volume left mid-page. The paper lies flat, its edges aligned. No bookmark marks the place. It appears as though someone stepped away only moments ago. Yet no one stands nearby. You do not question it. Instead, you allow your fingers to hover just above the page, feeling the faint warmth that lingers in the paper from absorbed light. Then you withdraw. The library does not demand interaction. It offers space. You continue walking until the rhythm of your steps aligns with the quiet hum that underlies the room. The two sounds merge gently, neither leading nor following. The dome above holds its curve. The shelves maintain their arcs. The light continues lowering in increments too small to measure, and you remain within it, moving, pausing, drifting along the steady circumference of a place that does not rush, does not insist, and does not need to explain itself. The space continues. You walk. You continue between the shelves at a pace that does not need to be measured. The floor beneath you holds a faint coolness, as though stone remembers shade longer than it remembers light. Above, the dome gathers the last of the afternoon in a wide, diffused arc, its curve steady and unbroken. From this level, the central expanse feels neither grand nor small. It simply holds its proportions without strain. You pass a ladder resting against one of the outer shelves. Its rails are worn where hands have steadied themselves over many years. The wood is darker at those points, polished not by intention, but by repetition. One rung bears a faint indentation near its center, a softened notch where pressure has returned again and again. It is the kind of detail you might miss if you were searching for something else. But here, nothing demands searching. A thin draft moves along the aisle, carrying the dry scent of paper and cloth. It is not a cold draft. It feels like air that has traveled gently along curved stone and returned changed only by distance. It slides past your sleeve, then thins again into stillness. Somewhere across the floor, a page turns. The sound is light, almost a whisper of fibers separating and settling again. It travels upward, touches the ribs of the dome, and softens before it can echo. You move toward the inner ring of shelves where the bindings grow older in tone. Their spines carry deeper hues, muted brown, charcoal, faded indigo. A few lean slightly together, as though weight has shifted over time and settled into companionship. You pause and rest your fingertips lightly against one row. The linen beneath your touch feels cool, textured, but worn smooth at the edges. There is a place where one thread in the weave sits slightly thicker than the rest, barely perceptible, yet present if you trace the surface slowly enough. It is enough. You let your hand lower. The rhythm of the room does not alter. Above, light narrows by a fraction. It does not dim abruptly. It gathers itself inward, concentrating gently at the dome's highest curve before spreading again in a softer band. Evening rarely announces itself, does it? It simply adjusts. You continue along the circular path, following the natural curve that the architecture offers. The repetition of shelves and arches does not feel redundant. It feels steady, like breath that does not need to vary in order to remain alive. At the center of the room, a small stand holds a narrow volume open upon a slanted surface. Its pages are thin, almost translucent at the edges where light passes through them. A faint crease marks the top corner of one page, not folded, only pressed slightly where someone once rested a finger longer than intended. You do not open it further. The crease remains where it is. You step around the stand and notice how the acoustics shift slightly in the central ring. Sound seems to gather more closely here, as though the dome leans inward. Even your own breathing feels present without becoming pronounced. It is simply part of the atmosphere. A faint mechanical hum adjusts somewhere high above, not a change in tone, only a recalibration. The air system responding to the gradual cooling outside. The hum remains low enough to blend with the room's constant hush. You move toward one of the reading tables set slightly apart from the others. This one carries a narrow brass lamp whose shade directs light downward in a contained circle. The lamp is not lit brightly. It glows with restraint. The edge of its base shows a faint scratch that has been polished by countless cloths over time. You sit for a moment. The chair receives your weight without complaint. Its cushion holds a subtle indentation at the center where others have rested before. The fabric is smooth but not slick. It offers quiet friction, enough to anchor you without resistance. Your hands rest on the table's surface. The wood grain flows in long, even lines. There is a place near the far edge where the varnish has thinned, revealing the natural tone beneath, slightly warmer, slightly matte. You trace the line with your gaze, then you lift your eyes again toward the shelves. The dome continues to lower its light. The change is incremental, measured. From somewhere near the outer wall, a door hinge sighs once, not from opening, but from subtle pressure shift as the building cools. The sound is brief, contained. You stand again and resume your slow circuit. The aisles feel narrower now, not in dimension, but in perception, as though your awareness has softened at the edges. The shelves no longer feel separate from the floor beneath them. The floor no longer feels distinct from the air above it. Everything holds together within the dome's curve. You pause near a tall stack where the volumes rise nearly to the ceiling. A narrow ladder rail glints faintly where light touches it. The metal carries the last warmth of the day before it will settle into night's cooler tone. You rest your hand briefly against it. The temperature difference is subtle. It eases quickly. There is something reassuring about rooms that adjust without announcement. You move on. The central space opens before you again. A few tables now sit in deeper shade as the light's arc narrows further. The lamp's contained circles of illumination remain steady, their glow independent of the sky above. It is a different kind of light, self-contained. The contrast between natural and constructed illumination does not jar. It blends gradually, one taking the lead as the other recedes. You notice how the ceiling ribs catch shadow differently now. Earlier, they stood out in pale relief. Now they gather darker lines between them, creating a subtle pattern overhead, not dramatic, simply more pronounced. The dome feels higher, or perhaps you feel lower. The difference is small enough not to matter. You step toward the outermost ring where narrow windows punctuate the stone at measured intervals. Through one pane, the sky shows a deeper tone, silver turning toward blue. The glass diffuses the color, softening its edge before it reaches the interior. The library remains constant. A thin column of light slides slowly across the floor near your feet. It reaches the edge of a table leg and climbs a fraction of its surface before receding again as cloud shifts beyond the dome's aperture. Movement continues. Nothing insists upon it. You pass another ladder where a faint scuff marks one rail at shoulder height. The scuff has been worn smooth by fabric brushing against it over many years. It is not damage. It is history without narrative. You let your fingers hover just above it, then withdraw. A book near the end of a shelf sits slightly forward compared to its neighbors. Not out of place, only advanced by a fraction. Its spine is a muted green, the title embossed in gold, so faint it almost disappears in shadow. You ease it back into alignment. The motion is small. It settles easily. Somewhere below the hum of the air system, there is a softer undercurrent, the low resonance of the dome itself as it holds sound and redistributes it. The resonance is not audible as a distinct note. It feels more like a pressure that steadies the room from above. You stand once more at the center. From here, the shelves form concentric rings that feel less architectural and more rhythmic. They do not lead the eye outward. They draw it inward and outward simultaneously, creating a gentle oscillation of focus. Your breathing follows without effort. In, out, even. The light above continues its narrowing path. It does not vanish, it shifts. A faint shimmer touches the uppermost rib, then thins. You notice how your awareness no longer isolates single objects as clearly. The edges of tables and shelves blur slightly into one another. The difference between surface and air becomes less distinct. It is not confusion, it is softening. You walk again along the outer ring, letting your steps align with the subtle pulse of the building. The rhythm is neither fast nor slow. It is simply continuous. At one shelf, you pause beside a volume whose cloth cover has faded unevenly, lighter along the spine's curve where light has reached it most often. The fade is gradual, almost imperceptible unless compared closely with its neighbors. Light leaves its mark gently. You stand there a moment longer than necessary, then continue. The dome now holds a cooler tone. The silver overhead deepens into muted blue. Lamps below appear warmer by contrast, their contained circles creating small islands within the widening shade. Nothing feels diminished, only adjusted. A page turns once more. The sound travels upward, thinner than before. You let your gaze lift again toward the dome's apex. The aperture remains visible, though the sky beyond is less bright. The curve of glass above you reflects a faint interior glow, creating a subtle overlay of light upon light. The library breathes without effort, and you move within it not as an observer outside the structure, but as part of the same steady interior rhythm that the shelves, tables, air, and dome already share. The movement continues, the light lowers, the room holds, and your awareness eases further into its curve, where repetition does not become monotony and stillness does not become absence, but everything simply remains adjusted, balanced, and quietly alive within the vast dome that neither expands nor contracts, but gathers and releases its light in measured, unhurried arcs. You remain near the center of the vast circular floor, though the sense of center begins to loosen. The dome above no longer feels like something separate from you. Its curve does not press downward. It holds upward, as though the air between you and the glass has thickened into something gently supportive. Light continues to lower by increments, so small they almost escape notice. The pale band that once traced the upper ribs now thins into a softer tone, as if the day is folding itself inward before settling beyond sight. You walk again, though the movement feels less like walking and more like drifting along a quiet current that runs between shelves. Your steps make no sharp sound. The floor receives them without echo. Even the faint shift of fabric at your sleeve is absorbed into the wide hush. A ladder rests against one of the inner tiers, its wheels touching the rail with a low metallic presence. The rail carries a faint sheen where it has been polished by years of slow adjustment. One small bolt at the base sits slightly darker than the others, its head worn smooth at the edges. It is not misaligned, it simply bears the history of turning. You place your palm against the ladder's side. The wood is cool, then you lower your hand again. Across the circular span, a single lamp brightens slightly as the surrounding light diminishes. It does not flare, it finds its level. The glow gathers more distinctly along the page of an open book, revealing the fine grain of paper and the faint impression where ink has pressed into its fibers. The page does not turn, it rests. You move toward a high shelf where the volumes are arranged with patient symmetry. Yet even here, no line is perfectly exact. A few spines lean by a fraction. A few edges stand forward just enough to catch shadow differently. The irregularities do not disrupt the whole, they give it quiet depth. There's something reassuring about rooms that do not insist on perfection. You let your fingertips hover near the cloth of one binding. The surface carries a faint nap, softened by time. Near the bottom edge, the cloth is slightly darker where fingers have brushed it most often. A thicker thread runs along one seam, barely visible but tangible beneath slow touch. You withdraw your hand. The dome above darkens further. Its glass now holds the deeper blue of early night, and faint reflections of the interior lights begin to overlay the sky beyond. The structure feels less transparent and more enclosed, not confined, only gathered. A faint mechanical hum adjusts again somewhere high above. It is steady, almost imperceptible, like the breath of a building that has learned how to regulate itself without drama. You step toward one of the tall windows along the outer wall. Through the pane, the horizon has nearly dissolved into tone. There is no distinct line now between land and sky, only gradient. You stand there long enough for your eyes to adjust. The interior light begins to feel primary. Behind you, a page turns once, softer than before, as though even that small motion has entered the night's cadence. The sound travels outward, touches the shelves, and thins into nothing. You turn back toward the center. The circular geometry that once felt architectural now feels rhythmic. The shelves curve around you not as barriers, but as orbiting bands. The reading tables sit within those bands like small constellations of warm light. Your sense of standing within a room begins to soften. It becomes more like being held inside a steady arrangement of surfaces and air. You move slowly between two shelves that rise higher than the others. Their height draws your gaze upward. Above them, the dome's ribs cross like faint arcs of shadow against the dimming glass. The repetition of those ribs does not feel redundant. It feels stabilizing. One, then another, then another. The pattern does not demand attention. It offers it gently. You reach the far side of the library where a narrow alcove holds a single long table beneath a lower arch. The arch frames the dome's curve beyond, creating a smaller echo of the larger form. The table's surface carries a faint scratch near its center, not deep, only visible when light touches it at a certain angle. You trace it briefly with your gaze, then let it be. The lamps here glow steadily. Their warmth does not compete with the fading sky, it complements it. The air between the lamps and the dome feels layered, light within light, shade within shade. Your breathing aligns without effort. In, out, even, the difference between your breath and the building's hum becomes less distinct. You step back into the wider circle. The shelves feel closer now, though their distance has not changed. The sense of scale adjusts as light lowers. Shadows gather in the upper tiers, creating depth where brightness once flattened detail. The library does not become darker, it becomes deeper. You notice how your awareness no longer isolates objects in the same way. The edges of books and tables blur softly into one another. The dome's curve feels less like a boundary and more like a horizon that exists within the room itself. You move along the rail where the ladders slide. The metal is cool beneath your fingertips. A faint scuff marks the rail where wheels have passed repeatedly. The scuff has grown smooth over time, polished by movement that never rushed. It continues. There is no need to follow it. A lamp at the center table flickers once, not from failure, but from the gentle adjustment of current as night settles more fully outside. The flicker is contained, a small ripple of brightness that steadies almost immediately. You do not turn toward it. The steadiness returns on its own. The dome now reflects more interior light than exterior sky. The glass appears darker, and within it you can faintly see the echo of shelves below, mirrored upward in soft distortion. The room reflects itself. The sensation is subtle but present. You stand again beneath the dome's apex. The aperture above is no longer bright. It is a dim oval set into the deepening tone of night. The shift does not feel like an ending of day. It feels like a transition of emphasis, from outward light to inward glow. There is something quietly reassuring about structures that continue whether seen or not. You lower your gaze. The reading tables hold their warm circles steadily. The shelves remain aligned in their slow arcs. The ladders rest where they were placed. Nothing hurries. You walk once more along the circular path, but now the motion feels less like movement and more like continuity. The space between your body and the shelves seems thinner, as though air has grown denser, binding surfaces together in a shared rhythm. Your steps slow, not because you decide to slow them, because the room has found its level. A single distant door closes somewhere beyond the outer wall. The sound is muted, filtered through stone and air before it reaches you. It does not disrupt the hush. It settles into it. You pause near a high stack and tilt your head slightly upward. The ribs of the dome now read as shadowed lines across a darkened curve. The light from below touches them faintly, revealing their shape in contrast rather than brightness. The architecture remains present, but it no longer commands attention. It simply holds. You let your hands rest loosely at your sides. The distinction between standing and being held begins to blur. The floor supports you, the air steadies you. The dome encloses without enclosing. Identity softens further. You are no longer quite separate from the circular arrangement of shelves. Your presence feels like one more quiet element within the pattern, not added, not removed, simply included. A faint warmth lingers near one lamp where you pass. The heat from its bulb rises gently, thinning into cooler air above. The gradient is subtle but perceptible if you move slowly enough. You move slowly enough. There is no narrative here, no unfolding event, only the gradual lowering of light and the steady continuation of interior glow. A book rests slightly forward on one shelf, its spine catching a thin line of lamplight. The gold of its title gleams briefly, then dims as you shift position. The gleam does not repeat. It was enough once. You reach the center again. From here, the shelves radiate outward in widening arcs. The geometry feels less like architecture and more like breath expanding and returning. You stand without intention. The dome above has become a darkened canopy, faintly reflective, quietly vast. The room below remains illuminated in contained circles. The library holds itself, and you remain within it, not observing from outside, not directing from within, simply present as the night completes its gradual shift, and the interior light settles into full steadiness beneath the vast, curved glass that neither presses nor recedes, but gathers everything gently into one continuous, unbroken rhythm. The lamps now hold the room entirely. Outside the dome, the last trace of dusk has thinned into a tone too faint to separate from night. The glass above reflects only the interior, circles of light, faint arcs of shelving, the pale suggestion of movement when you shift your weight. You remain near the center, though center has lost its sharp meaning. The circular floor no longer reads as a point from which distances radiate. It feels more like a gentle axis around which the room breathes. A faint current of air moves across the open space beneath the dome. It is not wind. It is the subtle exchange between warm light below and cooler night above. The current brushes your cheek lightly, then settles. You walk along the inner ring again, but your steps feel quieter now. Even the soft friction of sole against stone seems to fold into the larger hush before it fully forms. The shelves rise around you in tiered arcs. Their upper levels are dimmer, yet not lost. Light touches them in gradations, brighter at the lower edges, softening as it climbs. The effect is not theatrical. It is natural, as if illumination understands where to linger. A ladder rests halfway along the rail. Its wheels are aligned with the track, one slightly angled inward from long use. A faint scratch runs along the side panel near the middle rung, shallow and almost invisible unless light strikes at just the right angle. You place your hand there briefly. The wood is neither cold nor warm. It holds the temperature of the room balanced. Then you move on. There's something steadying about objects that carry no urgency. A page turns somewhere behind you, not abrupt, just the quiet release of paper from paper. The sound glides outward and thins into air. You do not turn to locate it. It belongs to the whole. You pass a table where a stack of books rests in deliberate order. The top volume is slightly offset, its corner projecting beyond the one beneath it by a fraction. The misalignment is not careless. It suggests pause as though someone set it down and allowed it to remain exactly as it landed. You straighten nothing. You continue. The dome above feels lower now, though it has not moved. Night has deepened the contrast between interior and exterior, creating a sense of enclosure that is not confining. The glass no longer reveals distance, it reflects proximity. The room mirrors itself upward in softened geometry. You lift your gaze. The ribs of the dome trace arcs across the darkened glass, each rib intersecting another at precise intervals. Yet the pattern does not feel strict, it feels rhythmic, one curve meeting another. Holding, then continuing, your breathing aligns without instruction. In, out, the rhythm of inhalation and exhalation does not dominate, it blends. A faint mechanical adjustment hums once near the apex. The sound is low and contained, more vibration than tone. It fades before you can measure its duration. You step toward the outer ring of shelves where the light falls at a sharper angle. Here, the texture of bindings becomes more visible. Cloth threads catch illumination differently depending on how they were woven. Some reflect slightly more, some absorb it entirely. You run your fingertips along one spine. The cloth carries a subtle grain, and near the lower edge, a thicker thread has worked its way closer to the surface over years of contact. It is not a flaw, it is a trace of making. You lower your hand. The air near the shelves feels marginally cooler than at the center. The lamps radiate warmth inward, leaving the outer arcs touched by a gentler gradient. The shift is subtle, perceptible only because you are moving slowly enough to notice. You are not hurrying, there is nowhere to arrive. The circular symmetry begins to feel less like a design and more like a condition. The shelves do not surround you, they include you. The tables do not occupy space, they define it softly. You pause beside a narrow stair that leads to the upper tier. The steps are worn slightly in the middle, polished by repetition. One edge carries a faint scuff where a shoe must have grazed it often enough to smooth the grain. You rest your hand on the banister, then release it. The night beyond the dome has become uniform. No stars are visible from this angle, only the interior light reflecting back toward itself. The room feels self-contained now. A hinge sighs softly at one of the side doors, not a door opening fully, just adjusting as temperature shifts. The sound is brief and non-intrusive. It settles quickly into the layered hush. You move back toward the central table. The lamp there casts a circular pool of light that appears almost solid in its steadiness. The pages beneath it glow gently, revealing the faint indentation of letters pressed into paper long ago. Ink sits within those impressions, held. You notice how the light edges do not cut sharply into shadow. They fade gradually, merging without line. The merging feels earned. You stand there long enough for the difference between light and shade to soften in your perception. The contrast remains, but its edges blur. A soft exhale leaves your body. The sound is barely audible. It joins the room. There's something reassuring about spaces that do not react. No object shifts when you move. No echo returns your step. The architecture absorbs and steadies. You begin another slow circuit, but this time you do not trace the full arc. You drift between inner and outer rings, allowing your path to curve naturally rather than follow structure exactly. The floor beneath you remains cool and firm. The stone carries faint variations in tone, subtle marbling that becomes visible only in angled light. A thin vein runs diagonally across one section, almost hidden until you pass over it. You notice it, then let it remain as it is. The shelves continue their quiet presence. The ladders rest. The tables hold their lamps in patient stillness. You sense the boundaries between your outline and the room's geometry easing further. The distance between your shoulder and the nearest shelf feels less measurable, more atmospheric. The air itself seems to gather around edges, rounding them gently. You lift your gaze once more. The dome no longer feels like a ceiling, it feels like a held sky. Interior reflections trace faint arcs across its surface. The curves of shelving below appear above you in softened inversion. The room contains its own echo. You remain beneath it, not scented, not peripheral, simply present. A page turns again somewhere in the upper tier, slower this time. The paper moves against air with minimal resistance. The sound travels downward like a small ripple across still water, touching each level before dissolving entirely. The repetition does not accumulate, it deepens. You walk toward a narrower alcove where a single desk sits slightly apart from the circular flow. The lamp here is smaller, its light more contained. The desk surface carries a faint indentation where elbows must have rested repeatedly. The indentation is subtle, visible only when the light skims across it at an angle. You place your palm there briefly. The surface feels smooth, then you withdraw your hand. The temperature of the room has leveled. No part feels significantly warmer or cooler now. The air has settled into uniformity, balanced between lamp and dome. You stand still. The sensation of standing begins to dissolve into something less defined. The distinction between your weight and the floor's firmness softens. The air around your shoulders feels continuous with the space beyond. There is no moment of transformation, only a gradual easing. The library continues its quiet function whether you move or not. The books remain arranged. The light remains steady. The dome holds its arc without adjustment. You take one final slow step back toward the center. The circular arrangement reads now as a single, unified presence rather than separate components. Shelves, tables, lamps, dome, all part of one steady composition. You are within that composition, not as an observer, not as an interruption, simply as another quiet element in the arc of light and shadow that continues without effort beneath the vast, curved glass that reflects nothing but the calm interior it has gathered into itself. The upper tiers feel closer now, not physically nearer, but perceptually nearer, as though the air between levels has thinned into something almost transparent, allowing distance to soften without collapsing entirely. The ladder you passed earlier no longer reads as a tool. It feels like part of the structure's breathing. You approach it again, not to climb, but to stand beside it. The metal track along which its wheels rest carries faint grooves worn into place over years of movement. The grooves are not deep. They are simply present, quiet lines marking repetition without urgency. Your fingers brush the rail. The metal holds the night's cooler tone now. The warmth from the lamps no longer reaches this outer edge as strongly. The temperature shift is subtle, but noticeable when you allow your attention to rest long enough. Above, the dome gathers darkness more fully. The interior reflections have grown softer, less defined. The shelves mirror faintly against the glass, but their edges no longer appear crisp. They seem to blend into one another in the curved surface overhead. You begin to ascend, not quickly. Each step lands without echo. The stair absorbs the contact of your weight and returns nothing but stability. Halfway up, you pause. The air feels marginally lighter at this height. The warmth from the lamp spreads upward in a thin veil before dissolving against the dome's curvature. It does not accumulate. It simply settles into equilibrium. You continue. From the upper tier, the circular floor below appears less like a center and more like a calm interior horizon. The tables become islands of light within a darkened field. Their glow does not spill outward aggressively. It remains contained. There's something steady about that containment. You rest your hand along the railing. The wood carries a faint indentation where palms have pressed repeatedly over years. The indentation is smooth, worn not by force, but by presence. You stand there long enough to sense how the room feels from above. The shelves form concentric arcs beneath you, rising and falling in layered rhythm. The geometry does not assert itself, it supports itself quietly. The page turning sound returns, closer now. It originates from somewhere along this upper ring. The page lifts, hesitates in air, then settles against its companion sheet with a sound like a breath finishing. You do not seek its source. You walk along the curved path instead, allowing the circular architecture to guide your pace without instruction. The dome above has become nearly opaque from the outside's darkness. It reflects interior light faintly, creating a softened halo effect around each lamp below. The reflections blur at the edges, merging gradually with shadow. Your shadow follows you along the upper walkway, elongated by the lamps beneath. It stretches across shelves and bindings without distortion. The edges are rounded, not sharp. A small brass plate affixed to one shelf catches your eye. The engraving has dulled slightly over time. The letters remain legible, though the edges have softened. One corner of the plate sits a fraction lower than the others, as if tightened unevenly once and left that way. You touch the edge briefly. It does not shift. The air carries the faintest scent of paper, dry, almost sweet, mingled with the warmth that lingers from the lamps. It is not strong. It is simply present. You move past a narrow desk set into the curve of the upper ring. A lamp glows there too, smaller and more focused. Beneath it, a single open volume rests face down, as though someone paused mid-reading and stepped away without hurry. The pages curve slightly near the spine, not forced flat, not closed entirely. You do not adjust it. You continue. From this height, the dome no longer feels overhead. It feels surrounding. The curvature extends beyond peripheral vision, wrapping the space in a continuous arc that neither presses nor recedes. Your breathing aligns with the arc without effort. Inhale, exhale. The distinction between your body's rhythm and the room's structural rhythm begins to thin. You lean lightly against the railing and look downward again. The circular floor below appears less solid, more like a held surface suspended within a larger field of quiet. The stone does not reflect light brightly. It absorbs most of it, returning only a muted sheen. A faint mechanical hum adjusts somewhere within the structure, perhaps in the dome's support system or within the lamp's wiring. The sound is contained and low, barely audible. It does not disrupt. It confirms continuity. You step away from the railing and continue along the arc. The repetition of shelves and bindings could feel patterned, but here it feels organic. Each section carries slight variation in tone and height. Some shelves sit marginally closer together. Others hold volumes of differing thickness, creating subtle irregularity in the line. That irregularity feels reassuring. Perfection would feel rigid. This feels lived within. You reach the far curve of the upper ring where the lamps below cast light upward in gentler waves. The illumination here is dimmer, softer. The air feels cooler again, as though the warmth concentrates toward the center and leaves the outer edges untouched. You pause, stillness deepens. The boundary between your outline and the shelves beside you softens further. The curve of your shoulder echoes the curve of the dome above. The vertical line of your spine aligns with the vertical spines of the books before you. The alignment is subtle. It does not demand recognition. You stand there until the sense of being a distinct figure within the space begins to ease. You are not dissolving. You are integrating. A faint scuff marks one section of the upper floor near the wall, a narrow line where a ladder's wheel must have grazed the surface long ago. The scuff is almost invisible unless viewed from this angle. It catches a thin strand of light and then disappears as you shift. You notice it, then let it remain. The lamps below continue their steady glow. Their light no longer reads as individual sources. It reads as atmosphere, a contained radiance that fills the interior evenly without pressing outward. You walk back toward the stair. Each step downward feels quieter than the last, as though the structure itself has learned your weight and accommodates it gently. The air grows warmer as you descend, though only by degrees. At the base, the circular floor welcomes your return without change. The shelves, the tables, the dome, none have shifted in your brief absence. The room remains consistent, not static, but steady. You stand near the center once more. From here, the upper ring appears less distinct, blending into the arc of the dome's lower edge. The architectural layers feel unified rather than tiered. The light has lowered imperceptibly since you first entered. The lamps remain lit, yet their intensity feels softened by the night's full arrival. The dome reflects less sharply now, creating a more uniform dark canopy overhead. You close your eyes briefly. The soundscape holds. A distant page turning. The faint hum of structure. The subtle movement of air circulating beneath curved glass. When you open them again, the room feels closer, not physically smaller, but more cohesive. The boundaries that once separated shelf from floor, lamp from shadow, dome from interior have eased into a continuous field. You walk one final slow arc around the central table. The lamp's glow forms a circle that fades gently into surrounding dimness. The paper beneath it remains illuminated, letters resting quietly within their indentations. You do not read, you do not interpret, you simply remain. The dome above continues to hold the night. The library continues to hold itself. The air continues its barely perceptible exchange between warmth and coolness. The distinction between standing and resting softens further. You are not observing the space anymore. You are part of its quiet alignment, another presence within its measured arc, neither separate nor central, simply included in the steady hush beneath the vast curved glass that gathers and holds the darkness without effort. You remain standing at the center of the circular floor, not as a focal point, not as an observer, simply as another quiet alignment within the architecture. The lamps have lowered slightly again. It is subtle, the kind of shift you might only notice if you had been watching for it. But you are not watching. You are allowing. The glow now rests closer to the tables than before, no longer lifting upward with the same reach. The shelves beyond the outer rings soften into shadow more quickly. Their upper edges blur into the darkening curve of the dome. The dome itself has grown deeper. Earlier, it reflected faint traces of the interior, softened halos of light, vague echoes of shelves. Now the glass absorbs more than it returns. It holds the night almost completely. The reflection has thinned. You tilt your head upward. The curvature no longer reads as glass. It reads as sky. A contained sky. The interior lamps become constellations suspended beneath it, small pools of steady light that do not flicker, do not compete. They simply remain. Your breathing aligns without instruction. Inhale, exhale. The space between breaths feels wider now, not because you are holding them longer, but because the room itself feels wider inside your body. The air seems to enter more slowly, move more gradually, settle more completely before leaving. A chair near the nearest table sits slightly angled, not perfectly aligned with the desk's edge. That small misalignment feels intentional in its imperfection, a sign of use, of someone who stood and did not correct the angle before leaving. The chair does not demand adjustment. It rests. You walk toward it. Your steps are quiet on the stone. The floor no longer carries a sense of weight. It feels level, steady, almost buoyant beneath your feet, as though the stone itself has absorbed the memory of every footstep taken across it and learned to respond without resistance. You place your hand lightly on the back of the chair. The wood is smooth. A faint groove curves along the upper edge where fingers have rested repeatedly. The groove is not deep, it is simply there. You lower yourself into the seat. The movement is slow enough that the chair does not creak. It accepts your weight in one continuous shift. The wood beneath you is firm but not rigid. It feels like something that has learned to hold. From this seated vantage, the dome appears even larger. The curvature stretches outward in all directions without visible seam. The night beyond is complete now. No residual light lingers at the edges. The interior glow exists entirely within itself. A page turns somewhere behind you. The sound is familiar by now. It does not startle. It completes a rhythm already established. Lift, pause, settle. There is something almost tender about that sound continuing. It suggests continuity without urgency, presence without performance. Your gaze lowers to the table in front of you. A book lies open there. The paper's surface reflects the lamp's glow in a muted sheen. The ink rests within the grain, not sitting atop it. The letters feel embedded. You do not read them. Your eyes rest on the texture instead, the faint indentation where ink pressed into pulp long ago. The surface carries a softness that does not demand touch. You trace the edge of the page lightly with one finger. The paper yields a fraction under your skin. A thin ridge marks where it was cut. That ridge has softened with time, but it remains perceptible. You withdraw your hand. The lamp hums faintly. It is a low, stable tone, barely audible beneath the air's quiet movement. The hum does not fluctuate. It forms a continuous line of sound that feels almost structural, as though it is part of the room's foundation. You become aware of your shoulders. They have lowered without your noticing. Your spine rests against the chair's back. The curve of the wood meets the curve of your body without adjustment. A slight cooling gathers in the air as the night deepens. The warmth from the lamps remains, but it no longer expands outward. It concentrates close to the light sources, leaving the outer edges of the room more shadowed. The shelves at the perimeter are now shapes rather than details. Their spines are no longer individually visible. They form a single band of darkness around the circular floor. The distinction between shelf and shadow blurs, between shadow and dome, between dome and sky. The architecture has simplified itself. Your awareness follows. You close your eyes for a moment. The sounds remain, the faint hum, the distant page, the subtle exchange of air. Without sight, the dome does not disappear. It remains present as curvature felt rather than seen, an arc above, a held volume around. You open your eyes again. The interior lights appear dimmer still, not fading abruptly, simply easing into a deeper equilibrium with the night outside. A thin line of reflection arcs across the dome where interior light meets exterior darkness. It is faint, almost invisible, but it marks the meeting point between within and beyond. You watch it for a few breaths, then you stop watching. There is no need to track it. Your outline feels softer now. The edges of your hands resting on the table seem less sharply defined. The boundary between skin and air feels permeable, not because it is disappearing, but because it no longer feels defended. The room does not press, it holds. You lean back slightly in the chair. The wood supports you without comment. The slight angle of the seat allows your weight to settle toward the spine rather than forward. Your feet rest flat against the stone, but the pressure feels evenly distributed. A faint adjustment in the building's structure hums once, a barely perceptible recalibration in the dome's support system. It is contained and short-lived. Then stillness resumes. The upper tier is now almost fully shadowed. Only the faintest glow reaches the railings above. They appear as curved lines suspended in dark. The ladder's metal track reflects a thin silver streak before vanishing again. The interior no longer feels layered. It feels unified. Light, shadow, stone, wood, air, all existing within the same measured field. You become aware of the subtle weight of your own breath against the space. The air you release disperses without visible trace. It does not disturb the hush. There's something reassuring about that, the way the room accommodates your presence without shifting around it. You are not altering the library. You are participating in it. A final page turns somewhere at the edge of perception. It sounds slower this time. Lift, pause, settle, then no further movement. The lamps remain lit, but their glow has reached its quietest state. They neither brighten nor dim further. They simply maintain. Your gaze rises once more toward the dome. The glass now holds only darkness. The reflection of the interior has faded almost entirely. The outside night presses gently against it without intrusion. The vastness above does not feel empty. It feels complete. You notice how the curve of the dome mirrors the curve of your own breath, rising, falling, rising again. The repetition does not feel like a loop. It feels like alignment. Your hands rest loosely on your lap. The air cools by another subtle degree. The distinction between seated and supported softens further. The chair no longer feels separate from the floor. The floor no longer feels separate from the shelves. The shelves no longer feel separate from the dome. And the dome no longer feels separate from the night. The library holds its shape. You remain within it. No edges demand your attention. No movement asks to be followed. The vast interior beneath the dome exists in a single, steady hush, and you exist within that hush, neither central nor peripheral, simply part of the quiet geometry that has gathered and settled into itself. The air beneath the dome has cooled another quiet degree, not abruptly, not enough to shift your posture. Just enough that the warmth from the lamps feels closer to the tables than before, gathered rather than spreading. The outer ring of shelves now belongs almost entirely to shadow. Their outlines remain steady arcs in the dark, but their titles, their textures, their edges have softened beyond detail. You remain seated. The chair holds you with the same unremarked patience it has offered all evening. The slight angle of its back supports the curve of your spine without prompting adjustment. Your feet rest against the stone floor, and the stone feels neither cold nor warm, simply present. A faint movement of air circles high above, almost imperceptible. It does not disturb the lamps. It does not disturb the silence. It moves as though the dome itself inhales once every long while and then settles again. There is something reassuring about structures that breathe in their own way. You lower your gaze to the table. The open book before you remains untouched. The page has not shifted. The lamp's glow rests on it like a quiet pool. The paper's grain shows faintly where the light meets it, tiny ridges and indentations pressed long ago. You do not read the lines. You simply observe the way ink sits within fiber. A small mark near the lower margin, perhaps where a fingertip once paused too long, catches your eye. It is faint, almost erased by time, but still there. A soft oval where pressure once met paper. It feels like a trace of presence that does not intrude. You let your fingers rest near it without touching. The room continues. From somewhere above, a very subtle mechanical shift hums once and then resolves. The dome adjusting to temperature, the structure balancing itself. The sound is brief, no more than a sigh of metal easing against metal, and then stillness returns. You notice your breathing again. It is slower than before, though you have not instructed it to change. The inhale enters easily. The exhale leaves without pause. The space between them has widened into something unmeasured. Your shoulders sink another fraction. Across the circular floor, one lamp dims by a degree so slight it feels imagined. Its glow does not fade, it simply narrows. The pool of light it casts becomes more concentrated around its table. The rest of the floor grows marginally darker. The library does not resist the dimming, it absorbs it. The central space beneath the dome feels deeper now, not larger, but more expansive in its quiet. The edges are less defined. The distance between you and the far shelves feels softened, as though the air itself has thickened into something gently luminous. You close your eyes, the architecture remains. You can feel the arc above you even without sight. You can sense the curve of the shelves around you. You can sense the stone floor beneath your feet and the wooden chair supporting your weight. The room does not disappear when unseen. It holds. There's something steadying about that. You open your eyes again. The darkness beyond the glass dome has become complete. No faint suggestion of horizon remains. The interior lights now define the only visible space. And yet, rather than feeling enclosed, the room feels boundless. The boundary between interior and exterior has softened. The dome is no longer a barrier. It is a membrane, a thin surface where night rests lightly against architecture. A distant page turns once more, slower than before. Lift, pause, settle, then no further sound. You become aware that you are no longer listening for it. The anticipation has dissolved. The rhythm has integrated into the background of your awareness. Your hands rest loosely now, fingers curved slightly inward. The small muscles in your palms have released. The subtle tension you carried earlier, unacknowledged, almost invisible, has thinned into something softer. The air continues its slow exchange. A faint coolness brushes your cheek and then recedes. It feels like the night acknowledging your presence without shifting around you. The lamps hum quietly. The shelves remain. The stone floor holds. You lean back another fraction in the chair. The movement is so small it barely registers. The wood beneath you responds with equal subtlety, adjusting without sound. The chair does not creak, it simply receives. The library feels balanced now. No area calls for attention. No sound draws you outward. No light insists on focus. The interior has reached a steady equilibrium where everything exists at the same measured intensity. You notice how the curve of the dome mirrors the curve of your own rib cage, the rising arc above, the rising arc within. Inhale, exhale, the alignment feels effortless. A faint glimmer touches the glass high above, perhaps a distant star shifting position beyond the dome, perhaps a reflection you cannot quite trace. It appears and then fades without leaving a mark. You do not follow it, you remain. There's a quiet intimacy in vast rooms when they empty of motion. When nothing moves, nothing competes, nothing declares itself more important than anything else. The vastness becomes gentle. Your outline feels less distinct now, not vanishing, not dissolving, simply less defined at the edges. The air around your arms feels contiguous with your skin. The space behind your shoulders feels continuous with your spine. The distinction between within and around has softened. The open book before you remains still. You close it gently. The covers meet with a muted thud that barely travels beyond the table. The sound feels complete rather than final. The book rests closed beneath the lamp's glow. Your palm lingers on its surface for a moment. The cover is cool. The faint indentation along its spine suggests long use, a narrow crease where pages have opened and closed countless times. You withdraw your hand. The lamp above you dims another subtle degree. The glow narrows further, concentrating into a small circle on the table. Beyond it, the surrounding floor darkens. The shelves blur further into shadow. The The dome above is now almost indistinguishable from the night it encloses. The interior lights appear like scattered constellations suspended beneath glass. You feel yourself settle more deeply into the chair, not sinking, not collapsing, simply lowering into a steadier alignment with the structure that surrounds you. Your breathing grows quieter. Your awareness expands. The library continues. It does not depend on you to hold its shape. It does not adjust itself to your presence. It remains as it has always remained, an arc of stone, wood, and glass arranged in patient symmetry. And you remain within it, not separate, not central, just another quiet geometry beneath the dome. The air moves once more across the high glass. The hum of the lamp steadies. The shelves stand. The table rests. The chair supports. You are already within the rhythm. Nothing further required. The vast library beneath the dome continues as it always has. Its quiet arcs remain. You do not need to follow them. You are already held within them. The night gathers above the glass. The hush deepens around you. The room continues in its quiet way, and you remain gently within it. The vastness beneath the dome does not diminish. It deepens. The lamps now cast smaller circles of light, each one distinct, each one sufficient. The spaces between them have grown wider, but not emptier. The darkness does not press inward. It simply rests. You remain seated. Your hands lie open on the table now, palms relaxed, fingers neither curled nor extended. The skin along your wrists feels cool where the air touches it. The pulse beneath that skin moves at an even, unhurried pace. A faint shift travels through the structure high above, a settling of metal within stone, a subtle realignment as temperature drops another quiet degree. It is a sound so restrained it could almost be mistaken for memory. Then stillness resumes. There is something comforting about large spaces that require nothing from you. No decision, no interpretation, no effort. The book you closed remains beneath the lamp's glow. Its cover has taken on a warmer tone under the narrowing light. The small crease along its spine is more visible now, a shallow indentation where time has pressed itself gently into material. You notice it, and then you let it be. Across the floor, the last page somewhere in the room turns once more softer than before. The sound travels only a short distance, and then dissolves into the air. After that, no further movement. The library has reached a kind of equilibrium. You feel the arc of the dome above you even with your eyes lowered. The curve is steady. It does not loom. It does not close in. It simply spans. Your breathing aligns with that span. Inhale, exhale. The rise of your ribs feels mirrored by the arch overhead. The symmetry is subtle but present. There's something steadying about that quiet correspondence. The air cools another fraction. It brushes along the back of your neck and then settles again. The temperature change is slight, but enough to signal that night has fully claimed the exterior beyond the glass. Inside, the lamps remain, not bright, not dim, just enough. The shelves that circle the perimeter have softened into silhouette. Their lines remain clean. Their presence remains certain, but their details no longer call for inspection. The mind does not need to catalog. The body does not need to track. The structure holds itself. You lean back slightly. The chair receives the adjustment without sound. The wood beneath you feels stable, its surface worn smooth by years of use. Beneath your fingertips, the faintest ridge in the grain catches the light, a small irregularity that suggests the tree from which it came once bent toward wind. You rest your thumb against that ridge. Then release. The lamps dim once more, barely perceptible, but enough that the circles of light contract into tighter pools. The spaces between them now blend seamlessly into the darkness that fills the rest of the dome. It no longer feels like darkness, it feels like depth. The glass overhead has become indistinguishable from the sky beyond it. No reflection interrupts the view. No interior light breaks the illusion of continuity. The dome has dissolved into night. You are no longer beneath something. You are within something. A small mechanical hum adjusts once, a low, contained vibration that steadies and then fades. It does not demand attention. It feels like the building breathing in its own slow rhythm. You notice that your shoulders have dropped further. The tension along the back of your neck has eased. Your jaw rests without pressure. Your eyelids grow heavier, not from fatigue, but from comfort. You allow them to close. The interior does not vanish when unseen. The architecture remains. The shelves continue their quiet arc. The lamps glow steadily. The dome spans. The air moves gently. You do not need to observe it for it to exist. Your awareness widens. Without sight, the room feels larger, not smaller. The boundaries between object and space have softened. The edges of the table no longer feel sharp in your perception. The outline of your own body has grown less defined. You remain. The silence has thickened into something almost tangible, not weighty, not pressing, simply substantial. A single distant hinge sighs somewhere along the outer ring of doors. It closes without urgency. The sound does not echo, it settles. After that, no further interruption. There's a kind of grace in spaces that know how to settle into themselves. You inhale once more deeply. The air enters smoothly, cool, and clean. It fills the space behind your ribs and then leaves without resistance. The rhythm is steady now, not guided, not forced, just present. The dome above feels infinite. The library below feels grounded, and you are suspended gently between the two. Your hands rest lightly against the table. Your spine is supported. Your feet remain connected to the stone floor. The structure holds. The night holds. Nothing shifts abruptly. Nothing needs to. The interior lights dim one final fractional degree. The change is subtle enough that you sense it more than see it. The glow becomes softer, warmer, closer to the surface of the tables. The surrounding darkness embraces the remainder of the space without swallowing it. The library is neither bright nor dim. It is simply complete. You open your eyes once more. The lamps appear like quiet islands of light floating beneath an endless sky. The shelves stand like low horizons in the distance. The glass overhead has become pure depth, no seam, no edge. You are not looking at a ceiling. You are looking into space. The distinction between inside and outside no longer matters. You lower your gaze again. The book rests closed. The table remains steady. The chair continues its patient support. You do not need to stand. You do not need to move. The room does not require departure. It will continue with or without witness. Your breathing slows another degree. The inhale stretches slightly longer. The exhale lingers. The space between them widens into something generous. There's something deeply reassuring about structures that outlast urgency, that hold shape through seasons, that remain constant while light changes, while air cools, while sound fades. The vast library beneath the dome continues as it always has. Its quiet arcs remain. Its shelves hold their steady curve. Its lamps glow without spectacle. You do not need to follow that rhythm. You are already within it. The night gathers above the glass. The hush deepens around stone and wood. The air settles into stillness, and the rest will carry itself.